Why is she
Why
crying,
is she
Dad?
crying,
William
Dad?
Carter didn't look up at first. He was standing beside a glass display case in a small Brooklyn pawn shop, holding a thin silver bracelet, while his daughter examined it with careful, serious eyes. I don't know, he said calmly after a brief glance toward the corner. She probably went through something terrible. Life does that sometimes. He gently lifted the bracelet slightly. Come on, Annie. Look at this bracelet. You said you liked this one, remember? But Annie didn't move. Dad, she whispered, tugging lightly on his coat sleeve. She's really crying. Not just a little. And she keeps looking at those papers in her hand. William followed her gaze again. The woman sat in a wooden chair in the corner, her head down, her shoulders shaking. In her hands was a stack of papers, slightly bent and worn, like she had read them over and over again, hoping the words would change. Every few seconds she would wipe her face, look down at the papers again, and cry harder. William walked over to the counter. "Excuse me," he said quietly to the pawn shop owner. "Is she all right?" The owner sighed and leaned forward a little, lowering his voice. "She's been here a while. Tried to sell me her wedding ring. Problem is, the ring's not real gold. It's plated. I can't buy it." He nodded toward the corner. "She won't leave. Just sits there crying, holding those papers. Been like that for half an hour. If you ask me, probably got mixed up with some guy who lied to her. Fake ring, fake promises. Then life falls apart, and suddenly that ring is all you got left." William looked toward the woman again. She was holding the ring in her own hand, clutching it so tightly her knuckles were white. Behind him, Annie slipped her small hand into his. "Dad," she said softly, "maybe we can go ask her why she's crying." William hesitated. "Annie, sometimes people don't want strangers asking about their problems." Annie looked at the woman again. "But what if she does want someone to ask?" she said quietly. "When I cried, I wanted someone to ask." William looked down at her for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly and nodded. "All right," he said, "we'll ask." He took Annie's hand and walked slowly across the shop. When they stopped in front of the woman, she didn't look up. She kept her face covered, her other hand still gripping the ring and the stack of papers. William spoke gently. "Ma'am, are you all right? Why are you crying?" For a moment, the woman froze like she wasn't used to anyone asking that question. Then suddenly she broke. The quiet crying turned into loud, uncontrollable sobbing. She bent forward, covering her face, shaking as if all the strength she had been holding together finally collapsed. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bother anyone." "You're not bothering us," William said calmly. "Tell me what happened." The woman still didn't look up. She just held out the ring in her trembling hand like it was the only thing keeping her standing. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Can you buy this ring? Please. I know it's not worth much, but it's all I have left. My son is in the hospital. He needs surgery. I sold everything already. The apartment, the furniture, my car, everything." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, still not lifting her head. "This is my wedding ring. It's the last thing I have. I just need a little more money to save my son. Please, I'm begging you. Just buy it. I don't care how much. I just need to save my boy." She started crying again, harder this time, her hand shaking as she held out the ring. Annie looked at the ring, then turned to William. "Dad, I don't need the bracelet," she said softly. "Can we give her the bracelet money and take the ring instead? I want to trade my bracelet for her ring so she can save her son." William felt something in his chest break open in a way he hadn't felt in years. Annie took a small step closer to the woman and spoke in the gentlest voice she had. "Ma'am, you can look up. It's okay. My dad is here. He helps people. We're going to help you." The woman's crying slowly softened into quiet, shaking breaths. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, when she heard the words, "We're going to help you," she slowly lifted her head. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. her hair slightly messy like she hadn't slept properly in days. She looked first at Annie, then at William. William felt the world stop. He stared at her face, searching his memory, his heart suddenly pounding in a way it hadn't in years. "Emily?" he whispered. The woman's eyes widened slightly as she looked at him more carefully through her tears, and William Carter felt the blood drain from his face as the truth hit him all at once. The crying woman in the pawn shop was his brother's wife. Emily Carter stared at him as if she wasn't sure whether he was real or just a memory standing in front of her. "William," she said slowly, her voice shaking, "is that really you?" William nodded once. Up close, he could see how much life had changed her. The last time he saw Emily, she was a young woman standing beside his older brother with stubborn courage in her eyes, holding his hand like she was ready to fight the whole world. Now she looked thinner, exhausted, like someone who had been carrying something heavy for too many years without help. "I didn't recognize you at first," she said, wiping her face quickly, embarrassed to be seen crying like this. I didn't think anyone from the Carter family would ever speak to me again." William didn't respond to that. He just looked at the ring in her hand, then at the papers she was holding. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. "After you and my brother left, tell me everything." Emily let out a long, shaky breath. For a moment she didn't speak, like she didn't know where to begin. Then she looked down at the ring in her hand and started talking, her voice low and tired. "When we left your family, Daniel said we would be fine," she said. "He said we didn't need their money. He said he would take care of me. And for a while, he did. We rented a small apartment. He worked construction jobs. When our son was born, he cried and said it was the happiest day of his life." She smiled a little through her tears, but the smile didn't last. "Then things started to change," she continued. "Work wasn't stable. Bills piled up. He started drinking with the guys after work, then drinking before work, then not going to work at all." She swallowed hard. "I tried to help him. I really did. I worked at a diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. I thought it was just a hard time and we would get through it." William stood very still, listening. "But the drinking turned into gambling," Emily said. "And the gambling turned into debts. And the debts turned into lies." Her fingers tightened around the ring. "One day he left and didn't come home for 2 days, then 3, then a week. When he finally came back, he said he had met someone else, someone who understood him better." She gave a small, broken laugh. "He said he was tired of being poor, tired of struggling, tired of disappointing me." Annie was very quiet beside William now, holding his hand tightly. "I asked him how he could leave his son," Emily said, her voice shaking again. "Do you know what he told me? He said, 'He'll be better off without me.' Then he took what little money we had left and left." She paused, then added in a whisper, "That was the last time we saw him." William felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He remembered his brother as strong, confident, always laughing, always protecting him when they were kids. It was hard to connect that memory with the man Emily was describing. "I raised Noah by myself after that," Emily continued. "I worked wherever I could. Diners, cleaning houses, laundry services, anything. We moved from apartment to apartment because I couldn't always pay rent on time. But he's a good boy, William. He never complains. He tells me he's going to be a doctor one day so I don't have to work anymore." Her voice broke completely then. "A few months ago, he started getting tired all the time," she said. "He couldn't run anymore. He said his chest hurt. I took him to the hospital and they told me he has a heart condition. They said he needs surgery." She looked down at the papers again. "I thought insurance would help, but it didn't cover enough. The surgery is too expensive." She held up the ring with trembling fingers. "So I started selling everything," she said. "The TV, the couch, my bed, my car. I sold my wedding dress. I sold everything that wasn't necessary for Noah to live." Tears slid down her face again. "This ring was the last thing I had left. I thought at least this would be real gold. Daniel gave it to me on our wedding day. He said even if his family didn't accept me, this ring meant I was his family." Her hand started shaking again. "But the man here says it's fake," she whispered. "Fake gold, worth nothing." She stared at the ring like she didn't recognize it anymore. I think I think he must have switched it. When the gambling got bad, he probably sold the real ring and replaced it with this one. I didn't even know. All these years, I thought I still had something real left from my marriage. She covered her mouth and cried again, but this time the crying was quieter, like she was too tired to cry loudly anymore. I wasn't trying to sell a ring, she said softly. I was trying to save my son, and it turns out even my last memory was worth nothing. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, because this story has reached people from all over the world. And if you believe stories about kindness, justice, and second chances still matter, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. Annie couldn't hold it anymore. She stepped closer and gently touched Emily's sleeve. Your ring is not worth nothing, Annie said softly. It means you loved someone. That's worth a lot. Emily looked at her, tears running down her face. William looked at the ring, then at the hospital papers, then at the woman who had once been part of his family and had somehow ended up alone in a pawn shop trying to sell a fake ring to save her child. William did not speak immediately after Emily finished her story. The pawn shop felt smaller now, quieter, like the world had narrowed down to just the four of them: William, Annie, Emily, and the truth sitting heavily in the air between them. Emily was still looking down at the ring in her hand, turning it slowly with her fingers like she was trying to understand how something that once meant love, promise, and family had turned into a piece of metal no one wanted. Annie looked up at William. She didn't say anything this time. She just looked at him, waiting. William had seen that look before. The first time was the day he met her at the adoption center. She hadn't cried. She hadn't asked for toys. She had just looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was going to be someone who stayed or someone who left. He had promised himself that day that he would be someone who stayed. He looked back at Emily. Where is Noah now? He asked. At St. Ebru, Mary's, Emily said quietly. Children's Hospital, room 312. My neighbor is sitting with him while I try to find the rest of the money. She gave a small, tired smile. I told him I was going to sell my ring and everything would be okay. I told him not to be scared. Her voice cracked again. I think he knew I was lying. He's a smart boy. William nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked back to the counter. I'll take the bracelet, he told the pawn shop owner, placing some cash on the counter. The man looked a little confused. You still want the bracelet? Yes, William said. And I want you to do me a favor. The man nodded cautiously. What kind of favor? William took a business card out of his wallet and placed it on the counter. The man picked it up, looked at the name, and his eyes widened slightly when he realized who he was talking to. If this woman ever comes back here trying to sell anything again, William said calmly, you call me first. Not because I want to stop her, but because no one in my family is ever going to sit in a pawn shop again trying to sell their life to survive. Do you understand? The man nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Of course. William picked up the bracelet and walked back to Emily and Annie. He knelt down slightly so he was at eye level with Emily, but he didn't look like a billionaire at that moment. He just looked like a tired man who had just discovered that his family's past had been sitting in a pawn shop this whole time. Emily, he said gently, put the ring back on your finger. She shook her head immediately. William, I told you, I'm not taking your money. I didn't tell you all this so you would feel sorry for me. This isn't about feeling sorry, he said quietly. Then what is it about? She asked, finally looking at him directly. William held her gaze. It's about the fact that my brother's son is in a hospital right now, while I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. He paused, then added, and I didn't even know he existed. Emily's eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't look away this time. I wasn't going to come to your family, she said. I still remember what your father said to Daniel. I remember the way your mother looked at me like I was nothing. I promised myself I would never stand in front of that house and beg for help. You're not begging, William said. Not from me. Emily shook her head. It's still your money. William was quiet for a moment. Then he said something very slowly, very clearly. No, he said. It's Daniel's money too. He just never got the chance to earn it. Emily didn't know what to say to that. Annie gently took Emily's hand, the hand that was still holding the ring, and carefully closed Emily's fingers around it. You should keep it, Annie said softly. It's not fake if you loved him for real. Emily let out a small sob and nodded. William stood up and took out his phone again. He stepped a few feet away and made a call. "Mark," he said when the other person answered, "I need you to call St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Find out everything about a patient named Noah Carter, 8 years old. Heart surgery. I want the best surgeon available, and I want the surgery scheduled as soon as possible." "Yes," I said, "as soon as possible." He listened for a moment. "I don't care what it costs. Just make it happen. And Mark, don't tell the board yet. I'll handle them myself." He hung up and walked back. Emily was staring at him. "You can't just fix everything with a phone call," she said quietly. William looked at her. "No," he said, "but I can start there." She shook her head again, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you." William shook his head slightly. "You don't thank me, not for this." "Then for what?" she asked. "For not giving up," he said. "For raising Daniel's son when he wasn't strong enough to stay. For sitting in this pawn shop for half an hour, instead of walking away and letting your boy lose his chance." He paused. "You did your part. Now I'm doing mine." Emily covered her mouth and cried again, but this time the crying was different. It wasn't the cry of someone who had lost everything. It was the cry of someone who had been fighting alone for so long that she didn't know what to do when someone finally said, "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Annie slipped her hand into William's again. "Dad," she said quietly, "are we going to the hospital now?" William looked down at her and nodded. "Yes," he said. "We're going to meet your cousin." Emily's head snapped up. "Cousin?" William gave a small, tired smile. "If he's Daniel's son, then he's my nephew, which means he's Annie's cousin." He looked at Emily. "And that means whether my parents like it or not, you're still family." For the first time since they walked into the pawn shop, Emily didn't look like a woman who had lost everything. She looked like someone who had just found a door she thought had been locked forever. William had been in hundreds of hospitals in his life. He had donated to them, funded new buildings, had wings named after the Carter Foundation. His name was on plaques in lobbies, etched into glass walls, printed in gold letters on donor boards. But he had never walked into a hospital like this before, not as a donor, not as a businessman, but as a man walking beside a woman who was afraid her child might die. St. Mary's Children's Hospital smelled like disinfectant and coffee that had been sitting too long. The lobby was full of quiet conversations, tired parents, and children holding stuffed animals too tightly. Annie walked close to William, her hand wrapped around two of his fingers, unusually quiet as they followed Emily toward the elevators. Emily pressed the button for the 3rd floor. Her hands were still shaking slightly. "I told him I'd be back soon," she said, mostly to herself. "I told him I just had to take care of something important." "You did," William said. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped out into a hallway filled with soft light and cartoon paintings on the walls, animals playing baseball, smiling clouds, bright colors trying their best to make a place like this feel less frightening. They stopped in front of room 312. Emily paused with her hand on the door but didn't open it right away. She looked at William, suddenly nervous. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You've already done more than enough." William shook his head. "Emily, I haven't done anything yet." She nodded slowly, then pushed the door open. Inside the room, a small boy was sitting up in the hospital bed, a tray in front of him with untouched food. He looked smaller than William expected. Thin, pale, but his eyes were bright and alert, the kind of eyes that noticed everything. A middle-aged woman sat in a chair beside the bed. She stood up when Emily walked in. "There you are," the woman said. "He's been asking for you every 5 minutes." "Thanks, Mrs. Rodriguez," Emily said softly. "I'm so sorry it took so long." Then the boy saw her. "Mom," he said immediately, "did you sell the ring?" Emily froze for just a second, and William saw the moment a mother tried to decide whether to lie to protect her child or tell the truth and risk breaking his heart. She walked to the bed and sat down beside him, brushing his hair back gently. "I didn't sell it," she said softly. The boy looked down, trying to hide his disappointment, but he nodded like he was trying to be brave. "That's okay," he said. "Maybe we can sell something else." Emily's eyes filled with tears again. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. That's when Annie stepped forward. "We didn't sell the ring," Annie said, "because you're supposed to keep wedding rings. They mean family." The boy looked at her. a little confused, then looked at William standing behind her. "Who are you?" he asked. William stepped closer to the bed. For a moment, he didn't trust himself to speak. The boy had Daniel's eyes. The same eyes that used to look at him across the dinner table when they were kids. The same eyes that used to wink at him when their father was giving a long lecture about responsibility and reputation. "My name is William," he said finally. I'm your uncle." The room went very quiet. Emily looked at him, surprised he had said it so directly. Mrs. Rodriguez slowly sat back down, sensing this was a family moment. The boy frowned slightly. "Mom said we don't have any family." Emily closed her eyes for a second. William pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down so he was at the boy's level. "Your mom thought that," William said gently, "and for a long time, she was right. But she's not right anymore." The boy studied his face carefully, like he was trying to decide if this was true. "My dad had a brother named William," the boy said slowly. "But Mom said he was very rich and very busy and didn't know we existed." William felt that sentence like a punch to the chest. "She was right about that too," he said quietly. "I didn't know, but I know now." The boy was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question children ask when they don't care about money or status or history. "Are you going to leave again?" he asked. William shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Annie walked up to the bed and put the silver bracelet on the tray table. "I was going to buy this today," she said, "but I think maybe we should use the money for something more important. So this is for you. When you get better, you have to come outside and play with me, okay? Because my dad says you're my cousin." The boy looked at the bracelet like it was made of gold. "I've never had a cousin before," he said. "Me neither," Annie said. "So now we both do." Emily turned away slightly and covered her face, crying again, but this time she was trying to cry quietly so Noah wouldn't worry. William stood up and walked over to the window for a moment, giving her time. Outside, he could see the city moving like it always did, taxis, people, lights, life continuing without asking who was suffering and who was not. He took out his phone and checked his messages. Mark had already replied. "Surgery approved. Top surgeon available. Deposit handled. Schedule tomorrow morning." William stared at the message for a long moment, then put his phone away. He turned back to the room and looked at Noah, his nephew, sitting in that hospital bed trying to be brave so his mother wouldn't cry. And William Carter made a decision in that moment that had nothing to do with business. He was not just going to pay for a surgery. He was going to fix what his family had broken. He walked back to the bed. "Noah," he said gently, "how would you feel about moving into a big house for a while? Just until you get better. There's a big yard, and Annie has more books than anyone should be allowed to own." Noah looked at his mother, unsure. Emily looked at William. "William, that's too much." He shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "Too much would be walking away again." Noah looked at his mother, waiting for her answer like everything in his world depended on what she said next. Emily felt the weight of that moment in a way William probably could not fully understand. For years, every decision had been hers alone. Every bill, every move, every lie she told to make things seem less scary for her son, she had carried it all by herself. Accepting help now felt like stepping onto a bridge she wasn't sure would hold. "I don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. William shook his head. "Emily, a burden is something you carry unwillingly," he said. "This is something I'm choosing." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face, trying to see if this was guilt, obligation, or something else. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why now?" William didn't answer immediately. He pulled a chair closer and sat down across from her, his hands loosely clasped together. "Because I didn't know," he said, "and that used to feel like an excuse. But standing here, looking at Daniel's son in a hospital bed, it doesn't feel like an excuse anymore. It just feels like failure." He paused, then added quietly, "I can't change what happened to my brother, but I can change what happens next." Emily looked down at Noah, who was listening even though he was pretending not to. "Noah," Noah looked at William, then at Annie, then back at his mother. "Does the house have rules?" he asked. William almost smiled. "Yes," he said. "Two important ones." "What are they?" Noah asked. "First," William said, "you have to focus on getting better. That's your only job." Noah nodded seriously. "Okay. And second," William continued, "in this house, No one fights alone. If something is wrong, we fix it together. Noah thought about that for a moment, then nodded again. Okay, he said. I can follow those rules. Annie climbed onto the chair next to his bed. And there's a third rule, she added. William raised an eyebrow. There is? Yes, Annie said. In our house, you have to eat pancakes on Saturday mornings. It's the law. Noah looked at her like he wasn't sure if she was joking. Then he smiled for the first time since they walked into the room. I like pancakes, he said. Good, Annie replied. Then you'll be fine. Emily watched the two children talking about pancakes and books and whether Noah liked dogs, and for the first time in months, the tight knot in her chest loosened just a little. A doctor knocked lightly and entered the room, holding a tablet. Miss Carter, he said, I was told to come speak with you about Noah's surgery. Emily stood up quickly. Yes, doctor. I'm still trying to get the deposit. I went to the pawn shop today, but that's already been taken care of, the doctor said, looking slightly confused. The hospital received confirmation about an hour ago. Full coverage for the surgery and post-op care. Emily turned slowly and looked at William. You did this already? She asked quietly. William shrugged slightly. I told you I would start with a phone call. The doctor smiled. Your son is scheduled for surgery tomorrow morning. The chief pediatric cardiac surgeon will be performing the operation. He's one of the best in the country. Emily covered her mouth with both hands, tears filling her eyes again. Thank you, she whispered to the doctor. When the doctor left, the room was quiet again. Tomorrow? Noah asked, suddenly nervous. Is it going to hurt? Emily immediately sat beside him and took his hand. The doctors are going to fix your heart, she said softly. And I'll be right there when you wake up. William stepped closer to the bed. And I'll be there too, he said. So will Annie. Noah looked at him carefully. You don't have to, he said. William shook his head. Yes, I do, he said. That's part of the second rule. No one fights alone. Remember? Noah nodded slowly. That evening, William drove them to his house. Emily had never seen anything like it except in magazines, a large stone house with tall windows, a long driveway, and lights that made the place look warm instead of cold. She stopped at the entrance, suddenly unsure. I don't belong in a place like this, she said quietly. William looked at her. Emily, he said, this place has been too big and too quiet for a long time. Maybe the problem isn't that you don't belong here. Maybe the problem is that we were never meant to live in houses this big with so few people inside. Inside, Annie immediately started showing Noah everything: the bookshelf, the kitchen, the backyard, the guest room he would use. This is your room for now, Annie said proudly, opening the door. It's right across from mine, so if you get scared at night, you can knock on the wall. I'm not a baby, Noah said. I didn't say you were, Annie replied. I said if you get scared. Grown-ups get scared too, you know. From the hallway, William and Emily watched the two children talking like they had known each other their whole lives, instead of just a few hours. I used to be so angry at your family, Emily said quietly. I told myself if I ever saw any of you again, I would turn around and walk away. And now? William asked. Emily watched Noah sit on the bed, carefully placing the silver bracelet Annie had given him on the nightstand like it was something precious. Now I think maybe walking into that pawn shop today was the first good thing that's happened to us in a long time, she said. William nodded slowly. Annie saw you, he said. If she hadn't wanted that bracelet, we would have walked right past that shop. Emily looked at Annie, who was now explaining the pancake rule again very seriously. Then I guess, Emily said softly, a little girl changed our lives today. William looked at his daughter, and for the first time in many years, he felt something he had not felt since he and his brother were young, and life was still simple. He felt like maybe this was what family was supposed to be. Not perfect, not proud, not rich, just people who didn't walk away when things got hard. The house was too quiet that night, even with 4 people inside. William still felt the old silence in the walls, the kind of silence that came from years of living alone, eating alone, making decisions alone. The kind of silence that made a big house feel more like a museum than a home. But that night was different. From the kitchen, he could hear Annie explaining something very seriously, and Noah asking questions in a small but curious voice. Emily was sitting at the dining table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, looking like she still wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. William walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, watching the two children. "And this," Annie was saying, opening a drawer, "is the pancake drawer." Noah frowned. "Why is there a pancake drawer?" "Because pancakes are important," Annie said. "And important things need their own drawer." William crossed his arms, pretending to be serious. "I don't remember approving a pancake drawer." Annie looked at him. "You approved it when you ate 7 pancakes last Saturday." Noah laughed, and the sound surprised everyone, including himself. It was the first real laugh William had heard from him. "That was a strategic decision," William said. "I was testing the quality." "Sure," Annie said. "You tested all of them." From the dining table, Emily watched this exchange, and something inside her chest ached in a strange way. Not pain exactly. Something warmer, but almost unfamiliar. It had been a long time since she had sat in a room where people joked about pancakes instead of worrying about bills. Later that night, after the children had gone to their rooms, Emily stood in the guest room William had prepared for her and Noah. The room was bigger than her entire old apartment. Clean sheets, soft light, a window overlooking the backyard. She ran her hand slowly over the dresser, like she was afraid if she touched anything too hard, someone would come in and tell her this had all been a mistake. There was a soft knock on the door. "Emily?" William's voice. "Yes," she said, opening the door. He stood there for a moment, then handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Hospital paperwork," he said. "Surgery confirmation, post-surgery care plan, medication coverage, everything is arranged." She held the envelope but didn't open it yet. "I don't know how to live in a world where problems get solved this fast," she said quietly. William leaned slightly against the doorframe. "It doesn't usually happen this fast," he said. "It only happens this fast when someone with money decides it matters." Emily looked down at the envelope. "That's not fair," she said. "No," William agreed. "It's not." They stood there in silence for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said. "Of course." "Why did your family hate me so much?" she asked. "I was poor, yes. I didn't go to the right schools. I didn't have the right last name. I didn't know which fork to use at those dinners. But I loved your brother. I really loved him." William didn't answer right away. "My father believed that money was the same thing as worth," he said finally. "He believed our family had built something important, and that important things had to be protected. To him, Daniel marrying someone without money meant Daniel was throwing his future away." "And what did you believe?" Emily asked. William looked down the hallway toward the rooms where Annie and Noah were sleeping. "I believed my older brother was the bravest person I knew," he said quietly. "He walked away from everything because he loved you. I was too young to understand it then, and later, I was too busy to think about it." Emily nodded slowly. "He used to say you were the smart one," she said. "He said one day you'd run the whole company." "That sounds like Daniel," William said softly. "He wasn't a bad man, William," Emily said quickly. He didn't know how to fail. And after your family cut him off, he felt like he had something to prove. When he couldn't prove it, he started running away from everything that reminded him of what he lost." William closed his eyes briefly. "That sounded exactly like his brother. I was very angry at him for a long time," Emily continued, "for leaving, for choosing alcohol and cards and another woman over his own son. But tonight, sitting in that pawn shop, I realized something." She looked up at William. "Pride ruins more lives than poverty." William nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "it does." There was another moment of silence. "Get some rest," William said. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Emily nodded. "William?" He looked back at her. "Thank you," she said. "Not for the money. For not pretending you didn't know me when you saw me in that pawn shop." William thought about that for a moment. "I almost did," he admitted quietly. "When Annie first asked why you were crying, I told her it was none of our business. I was ready to walk out." Emily looked surprised. "What changed your mind?" William gave a small, tired smile. "Annie asked me a question," he said. "She asked me, but she's somebody's daughter too, right?" Emily's eyes filled with tears again, but she smiled this time. "That little girl," she said softly, Saved my son's life today." William looked down the hallway again. "Yes," he said. "She did." That night, William sat alone in his study after everyone had gone to bed. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty the way it used to. He opened an old drawer in his desk and took out a photograph he hadn't looked at in years. It was a picture of two boys, one about 12, one about 8, standing in front of a small house, both covered in dirt, both smiling like the world belonged to them. Daniel had his arm around his little brother's shoulders. William ran his thumb slowly over the photo. "I found them," he said quietly to the empty room. "I found your boy." For the first time since his brother had disappeared from his life, William Carter felt like maybe, just maybe, he was finally doing something his brother would be proud of. William did not sleep much that night. He sat in his study long after the house went quiet, the old photograph of him and Daniel still on the desk in front of him. The desk was made of dark walnut, imported from Italy, polished so perfectly that the lamplight reflected on its surface like glass. Everything in the room was expensive, rare, carefully chosen. But the only thing that mattered in that moment was a faded photograph of two boys who once shared a small bedroom and whispered about what they would become when they grew up. Daniel had wanted to build houses. William had wanted to build companies. Somehow, they had both succeeded and failed at the same time. Around midnight, William finally stood up and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. As he passed the hallway, he noticed a small light still on under the guest room door. He knocked softly. "Emily," he said, "are you still awake?" The door opened a few seconds later. Emily stood there in a borrowed sweater Annie had insisted she wear because it's warmer and smells like fabric softener. "I'm sorry," Emily said. "Did I wake you?" William shook his head. "I was working." She nodded, then hesitated. "Noah can't sleep," she said quietly. "He's scared about tomorrow." William was quiet for a moment. "Can I talk to him?" Emily looked surprised, then nodded and stepped aside. Noah was sitting up in the bed, the blanket pulled up to his chest even though he wasn't cold. He looked smaller at night somehow, younger than he had earlier in the hospital. "Hey," William said, walking in slowly. "I heard you're having trouble sleeping." Noah tried to act brave. "I'm okay," he said. "I'm just not tired." William pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. "When I was a kid," he said, "I had to get surgery once." Noah looked at him. "Really?" William nodded. "I broke my arm falling out of a tree. I was more scared of the hospital food than the surgery." Noah smiled a little. "Hospital food is really bad." "Yes, it is," William said. "But do you know what I remember most?" "What?" Noah asked. "My brother," William said. "He sat next to my bed the whole night before the surgery. He told me stupid jokes and said if I got scared, I could squeeze his hand as hard as I wanted." Noah was very quiet, listening. "And were you scared?" Noah asked. William thought about that question honestly. "Yes," he said. "I was, but I wasn't alone, so it didn't feel as scary." Noah looked down at his hands. "What if I don't wake up?" he asked quietly. Emily, standing near the door, covered her mouth with her hand. William leaned forward slightly. "Then I will be very angry with the doctors," he said. Noah looked up surprised. "Why?" "Because I just found my nephew," William said, "and I don't plan on losing him the next day." Noah stared at him for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if he believed him. "You really mean that?" Noah asked. William nodded. "Yes," he said, "and tomorrow, while you're in surgery, your mom, Annie, and I will be right there waiting. So when you wake up, the first thing you'll see is your family." Noah whispered the word quietly, like he was testing how it felt. "Family." "Yes," William said. "Family." Noah slowly lay back down on the pillow. "Okay," he said. "I think I can sleep now." William stood up and turned off the lamp, leaving only the small nightlight on. As he walked to the door, Noah spoke again. "Uncle William?" William turned back. It was the first time Noah had called him that. "Yes? Do you think my dad was a good person?" Noah asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and complicated. William walked back to the bed and sat down again. "I think," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "your dad was a man who made some bad mistakes. But I also think he loved you very much. And sometimes, people who are lost make bad choices because they don't know how to find their way back." Noah was quiet. "I don't remember him very well," Noah said. Just that he used to lift me up really high when I was little. William smiled softly. That sounds like him, he said. He used to do that to me too when we were kids. I thought he was the strongest person in the world. Were you sad when he left? Noah asked. William thought about it. Yes, he said, but I was more sad that I didn't go after him. Noah didn't fully understand that, but he nodded anyway, his eyes getting heavy. Good night, Uncle William, he murmured. Good night, Noah, William said quietly. He walked out of the room and closed the door gently behind him. Emily was standing in the hallway, tears running silently down her face. Thank you, she whispered. He hasn't slept peacefully in weeks. William nodded. He's a brave kid, he said. He has to be, Emily replied. He never had a choice. William looked down the hallway toward Annie's room, then back at Emily. He does now, William said. Now he has a choice. He has people. Emily nodded slowly. You know, she said, Daniel used to say that you looked cold, but you had the softest heart in the family. He said one day something would break it open and you wouldn't be the same after that. William leaned lightly against the wall, thinking about that. I think that something walked into a pawn shop yesterday looking for a $5 bracelet, he said. Emily smiled through her tears. Annie, she said. Yes, William replied. Annie. That night, for the first time in many years, William Carter did not fall asleep thinking about stock prices, contracts, or business deals. He fell asleep thinking about a small boy in a hospital bed, a woman in a pawn shop holding a fake wedding ring, and a little girl who believed that if someone was crying, you were supposed to walk over and ask why. And somewhere in the middle of the night, William realized that his life had quietly changed direction not because of a billion-dollar decision, but because his daughter had asked a simple question. Why is she crying, Dad? The hospital was quiet in the early morning, the kind of quiet that didn't mean peace, but waiting. William arrived before sunrise. The city outside was still gray, the streets half empty, the world not fully awake yet. Inside street, Mary's Children's Hospital, however, the lights were bright, the floors clean, and the nurses moved quickly but softly, like everyone understood that mornings like this were heavy for families. Emily sat beside Noah's bed, holding his hand with both of hers like she was afraid someone might take him away if she let go. Annie sat on the other side, her legs tucked under her, talking quietly to Noah about what cartoons he was going to watch when he got better. William stood near the window, speaking in a low voice on his phone. Yes, he said. I'll be at the office later. Cancel the morning meeting. No, I don't care if they're flying in from Chicago. They can fly back. He paused, listening. Because my nephew is in surgery this morning. That's why. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I don't remember asking for the board's opinion, William said calmly. Move the meeting to next week. He ended the call and put the phone away. When he turned back, he saw Noah watching him. Are you in trouble? Noah asked. William smiled a little. Something like that. Because of me? Noah asked quietly. William walked over and sat down beside the bed. No, he said. Because sometimes when you do the right thing, it makes the wrong people uncomfortable. Noah thought about that. That doesn't seem fair. It isn't, William said, but fair and right are not always the same thing. A nurse knocked and entered the room. It's time, she said gently. Emily's hand tightened around Noah's. I'll walk with you, she said. They helped Noah onto the hospital bed and covered him with a warm blanket. Annie walked beside him as they rolled the bed down the hallway. You remember the rules, right? Annie said. Noah nodded. Rule 1, get better. And rule 2? She asked. No one fights alone, he said. Good, Annie replied. So you're not allowed to be scared by yourself. You have to be scared with us. Noah smiled a little. When they reached the doors to the operating wing, the nurse stopped the bed. We'll take him from here, she said softly. Emily bent down and kissed Noah's forehead. I'll be right here when you wake up, she whispered. Noah looked at William. You too? I'll be right here, William said. Annie held up the silver bracelet. I'm keeping this safe for you, she said, so you have to come back and get it. Noah nodded. Then the nurses rolled him through the double doors. And just like that, the hallway felt very empty. Emily sat down in one of the chairs and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook silently. William sat beside her but didn't try to stop her from crying. Some moments were too big for words. After a while, Annie climbed into the chair on Emily's other side and leaned against her arm. "It's okay to cry," Annie said softly, "but he's going to come back, because he promised we would eat pancakes." Emily let out a small, broken laugh through her tears. "He does like pancakes," she said. They sat there for a long time. People walked past, doctors, nurses, other families, all moving through their own private storms. Hospitals were strange places, William thought. The worst days and the best days of people's lives happened in the same building, sometimes just a few rooms apart. After about an hour, William's phone started vibrating again. He stood up and walked a few steps away before answering. "Carter," he said. "William, it's your mother." He closed his eyes briefly. He had known this call was coming. "I heard an interesting story this morning," his mother continued. "Something about you paying for surgery for some woman and her child and bringing them into your house." "They're not some woman and her child," William said calmly. "They're Daniel's family." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "Daniel made his choices," his mother said finally. "We all have to live with our choices." William looked through the glass doors of the operating wing. "He was my brother," William said. "And that boy in surgery right now is your grandson." Another long silence. "You're risking your position in the company for this," his mother said. "The board is already talking." "Let them talk," William replied. "William," she said, her voice colder now. "Family reputation is not something you repair by dragging old mistakes into the light." William's voice was very quiet when he answered. "No," he said. "Family reputation is repaired by taking care of family." He ended the call before she could respond. When he walked back, Emily looked up at him. "Your family?" she asked quietly. "They know," William said. "And?" she asked. He sat down again. "They're not happy." Emily nodded slowly. "They never were," she said. Annie looked between them. "Why would someone be mad about helping Noah?" she asked. William looked at her, then said something he knew she would remember for the rest of her life. "Because, Annie, some people think money is the most important thing in the world," he said. "So, when you use money to help people instead of to become more powerful, they think you're wasting it." Annie frowned. "That's silly," she said. "What else is money for?" William looked at her for a long moment. "That," he said quietly, "is the best question anyone has ever asked me." They sat there together, waiting, not knowing that by the end of that day, the surgery would change Noah's life, and William's decision would change his own life in a way that would cost him far more than money. The waiting was the hardest part. Time moved differently in hospital waiting rooms. Minutes felt like hours, and every time the doors opened, every parent in the hallway looked up at the same time, hoping, fearing, praying the doctor was coming for them. Emily had stopped crying, but she hadn't stopped holding Noah's small jacket in her hands. She kept folding and unfolding it like if she kept her hands busy. Her mind wouldn't imagine all the things that could go wrong. Annie sat between Emily and William, swinging her legs slightly, but even she was quieter than usual. Every now and then she would look at the big double doors where Noah had disappeared, then look back at William like she was checking if he was still calm. William looked calm on the outside. He sat straight, hands clasped, eyes on the hallway. He had spent his entire life in waiting rooms like this, not hospital waiting rooms, but boardrooms, negotiation rooms, acquisition meetings rooms where everything could change with one decision. But this was the first time in his life where no amount of money, power, or influence could make the next hour go faster. After 2 hours, a doctor finally walked through the double doors and looked around the room. "Family of Noah Carter," he called. Emily stood up so fast the chair behind her almost fell. "I'm his mother," she said, her voice shaking. "Is he okay?" The doctor smiled gently, the kind of smile doctors learn to use when they know families are holding their breath. "The surgery went well," he said. "Very well. He's in recovery now. The next 24 hours are important, but the procedure was successful." Emily covered her mouth and started crying again. But this time it was the kind of crying that came after fear, not before it. She kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," like the words were the only thing holding her up. Annie smiled and looked at William. "See?" she whispered. "He has to come back. We still owe him pancakes." William nodded, but he didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. He just closed his eyes briefly and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding since the pawn shop. "When can we see him?" Emily asked. "In a little while," the doctor said. "He'll be sleepy, but you can sit with him." After the doctor left, Emily turned to William, tears still on her face. "I will never be able to repay you for this," she said. William shook his head. "Emily, if you say that again, I'm going to be offended," he said quietly. She looked confused. "Why?" "Because this isn't a loan," he said. "This isn't charity. This is what should have happened a long time ago. The only difference is I didn't know about you. If I had known—" He stopped there because there was no point finishing that sentence. The past did not change just because you wished it had. A few hours later, they were allowed into the recovery room. Noah looked very small in the hospital bed, wires and monitors around him, but his chest rose and fell steadily. Emily sat beside him immediately and took his hand. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm right here." Noah opened his eyes slightly. "Mom?" he murmured. "I'm here," she said again, brushing his hair back gently. He looked around slowly, still sleepy from the anesthesia. His eyes stopped when he saw William and Annie standing nearby. "You stayed," he said quietly. William stepped closer to the bed. "I told you I would." Noah looked at Annie. "Do I still get pancakes?" Annie nodded very seriously. "Yes. But first you have to get strong." "Doctor's orders?" Noah closed his eyes again, a small smile on his face, and fell back asleep. Emily watched him sleep for a long time before she spoke again. "When he was born," she said quietly, "Daniel held him and said, 'I know I don't have money to give you, but I'll give you my name.'" She paused, looking at Noah's face. "I used to be angry at that. I thought a name didn't mean anything if you couldn't pay rent or buy food." She looked up at William. "But today I think maybe a name does mean something," she said. "It means someone is supposed to stand next to you when things go wrong." William didn't respond right away. The Carter name had opened doors for him his entire life. Schools, banks, offices, politicians, people shook his hand differently when they heard his last name. But sitting in that hospital room, looking at his brother's son, he realized something he had never thought about before. A family name was not supposed to be a key that opened doors only for some people. It was supposed to be a promise that no one with that name would ever be left outside alone. That evening, William stepped out into the hospital hallway to make another phone call. "Mark," he said when his assistant answered, "I need you to prepare something for me. I want a full review of all Carter Company charitable funds, family trusts, and discretionary accounts." There was a pause. "That's a lot of paperwork," Mark said. "What exactly are you planning to do?" William looked through the glass window at Emily, sitting beside Noah's bed, holding his hand like she would never let go again. Annie was sitting in the chair, drawing something on a piece of paper for Noah. "I'm going to fix something my family broke," William said quietly. Another pause. "The board is not going to like this," Mark said. William nodded slightly, even though Mark couldn't see him. "No," he said. "They're not." "William," Mark said carefully, "you know what this could cost you, right?" William watched his daughter laughing quietly as she showed Emily her drawing. "Yes," he said. "I think I'm starting to understand exactly what it's going to cost me." He ended the call and stood there for a moment, alone in the hallway. For most of his life, William Carter had believed that success was measured by how much you could gain. But now he was beginning to understand that sometimes success was measured by what you were willing to lose in order to do the right thing. The day Noah was moved out of intensive care, William returned to his office for the first time in nearly a week. The Carter building stood in the middle of Manhattan like a monument to power, 42 floors of glass and steel, with the Carter name in polished metal across the front lobby wall. William had walked through those doors thousands of times. Employees usually straightened when they saw him. Assistants hurried. Executives followed him into elevators with tablets and reports. But that morning, something felt different. As William walked through the lobby, he noticed the way people looked at him, then quickly looked away. Conversations stopped when he passed. Two executives standing near the elevator suddenly became very interested in a document that neither of them had been reading a moment earlier. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. When the doors opened, his assistant Mark was already waiting. "They're all here," Mark said quietly. "All of them?" William asked. Mark nodded. "Board members. Legal. Your mother." They called an emergency meeting. William wasn't surprised. He took off his coat and handed it to Mark. "How bad?" William asked. Mark hesitated. They think you're moving company money without approval, he said. They think you're setting a dangerous precedent. William gave a small, humorless smile. A dangerous precedent, he repeated. That's an interesting way to describe paying for a child's heart surgery. Mark didn't smile back. This isn't just about the surgery, he said. They found out you're reviewing the old family trusts and the construction settlement files from years ago. William looked at him. Good, he said. That means they know I'm serious. He walked past Mark and toward the boardroom. Inside, 12 people sat around a long, polished table, men in expensive suits, women with perfectly organized folders. At the far end of the table sat his mother, Eleanor Carter, her posture straight, her expression calm and cold. William, she said as he entered, how nice of you to finally join us. William took his seat at the head of the table, but didn't open a folder, didn't turn on a screen, didn't pretend this was a normal meeting. I'll save everyone some time, he said. Yes, I paid for the surgery. Yes, Emily and Noah are staying at my house. And yes, I am reviewing every file connected to Daniel and any settlement your lawyers forced Emily to sign. A man on the board cleared his throat. William, with all due respect, personal matters should not interfere with corporate governance. William looked at him. A man died working on one of our sites, William said. That's not a personal matter. That's a corporate matter. That case was settled years ago, another board member said quickly. All documents were signed. The company fulfilled its legal obligations. William leaned back slightly in his chair. Legal obligations, he repeated. That's a very carefully chosen phrase. His mother finally spoke again. What exactly are you trying to do, William? William looked directly at her. I'm trying to find out how much silence cost my brother, he said, and how much it's going to cost us to tell the truth. The room went very quiet. You're talking about reopening old cases, one of the lawyers said. That could expose the company to lawsuits, media attention, regulatory review. Yes, William said. It could, and the board will not approve that, the lawyer said firmly. William nodded slowly. I'm not asking the board to approve it, he said. His mother's eyes narrowed slightly. You would risk this entire company for a woman who is no longer even legally part of this family? William's voice was very calm when he answered. I am risking this company, he said, for a boy who almost died while this family sat on more money than they could spend in 3 generations. That is emotional reasoning, one board member said, not business reasoning. William looked at him. You're right, he said. It's not business. It's called responsibility. His mother folded her hands on the table. If you continue down this road, she said, the board will be forced to hold a vote on your position as CEO. William held her gaze. I know. And you could lose everything, she said. William thought about Noah in the hospital bed, about Emily sitting in the pawn shop holding a fake wedding ring, about Annie asking, what else is money for? Not everything, William said quietly. The meeting ended without shouting, without drama, but with something much more dangerous: silence and decisions that would be made behind closed doors. When William walked back into his office, Mark was waiting. Well? Mark asked. William loosened his tie slightly. They're going to try to remove me, he said. Mark nodded slowly. I figured. William walked to the window and looked out over the city. From this height, people looked small, cars looked like toys. Problems looked far away, but he knew better now. The real problems were always at street level, in pawn shops, in hospital rooms, in the places rich men rarely looked. Mark, William said, still looking out the window. Do you know what my daughter asked me yesterday? Mark shook his head. She asked me what money is for, William said. I've been making it my whole life, and I didn't have a good answer. He turned around. But I think I do now, he said. Money is for making sure the people you love don't end up alone in pawn shops trying to sell fake wedding rings. Mark was quiet for a moment. And if the board removes you? He asked. William shrugged slightly. Then I'll be a man who did the right thing and lost a company, he said, instead of a man who kept a company and lost his family. He picked up his phone and looked at a message Emily had sent a few minutes earlier. Noah is awake. First thing he asked was whether Annie still owes him pancakes. William smiled for the first time that day. Cancel my afternoon meetings, he said. Going back to the hospital? Mark asked. William nodded. Yeah, he said. I have a pancake debt to discuss. When William walked back into the hospital room that afternoon, Noah was awake, pale but alert, propped up slightly on the bed. Annie was sitting beside him with a serious expression, holding a notebook like she was conducting an important meeting. Emily looked up when William entered. There were dark circles under her eyes, but for the first time since he had seen her in the pawn shop, she looked like someone who could finally breathe. He's been waiting for you, she said softly. Noah looked at William. We need to talk about the pancakes, he said. William pulled a chair closer to the bed. This sounds serious, he said. It is, Annie said. Because he thinks hospital pancakes don't count, and I agree. That seems like a very reasonable legal position, William said. We may need to draft a formal pancake agreement. Noah smiled a little, then winced slightly from the movement. Emily immediately leaned forward. Easy, she said. Doctor said, you have to move slowly. Noah nodded, then looked back at William. Mom said you have to go to work today, he said. You don't have to stay here all the time. William leaned back in the chair. I went to work this morning, he said. What happened? Emily asked quietly. She could tell from his face that something had. William was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the board is planning to vote on whether I should remain CEO. Emily stared at him. Because of us? She asked. Because of what I'm doing, William corrected gently. Not because of you. Because I'm reopening things the company would rather keep closed. Emily looked down at Noah, guilt written all over her face. William, you could lose everything. William looked at Noah, then at Annie, then back at Emily. No, he said. I would lose a job. That's not the same thing as losing everything. Emily didn't know what to say to that. Noah looked between them, trying to understand. What's a CEO, he asked. Annie answered before William could. It means he's the boss of a lot of people who wear suits and have boring meetings, she said. That's actually pretty accurate, William admitted. So they want to fire you? Noah asked. William thought about it. Yes, he said. They might. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, because you helped us? William didn't want to lie to him. Partly, he said. And partly because I'm trying to fix some things that should have been fixed a long time ago. Noah looked down at the hospital blanket, thinking in the slow, careful way children do when they are trying to understand adult problems. My mom says my dad used to say rich people can do whatever they want, Noah said. Emily closed her eyes slightly, embarrassed. Noah, it's okay, William said gently. Your dad wasn't completely wrong. Rich people can do a lot of things. The question is what they choose to do. Noah looked at him. And you chose us, he said. William felt something tighten in his throat, but he nodded. Yes, he said. I chose you. Annie looked very satisfied. Good choice, she said. They all laughed a little, and the tension in the room softened. Later that evening, after Noah fell asleep again, William and Emily walked slowly down the hospital hallway to get coffee. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty. They sat at a small table with 2 paper cups between them. You shouldn't lose your company because of us, Emily said quietly. William stirred his coffee but didn't drink it. Emily, I need you to understand something, he said. This is not just about you and Noah. You are just the part of the story I can see. How many other people signed papers because they were scared? How many other families were told, take this money and don't ask questions? How many other kids are sitting in hospital rooms while men in suits argue about legal obligations? Emily looked down at the table. When Daniel left, William continued, I told myself it was his decision and his life. That was easier than standing up to my father. Easier than asking questions. Easier than risking my place in the company. He paused. I've had a very easy life, Emily. I don't think I realized that until I saw you sitting in that pawn shop. Emily was quiet for a long time. I hated your family for years, she said finally. I used to imagine what I would say if I ever saw any of you again. I had whole speeches in my head. She gave a small, sad smile. But I never imagined this version of you. I never imagined this version of me either, William said. Emily looked at him. Are you scared? She asked. William thought about the boardroom, about his mother, about the possibility of losing the company his grandfather had built. and his father had protected, and he had expanded into an empire. Yes, he said honestly. I am. Emily nodded. Daniel used to say something, she said. He said courage isn't when you're not scared. Courage is when you're scared, and you do the right thing anyway. William smiled faintly. That sounds like something he would say. They sat there in silence for a while, two people connected by a man who had made too many mistakes and left too many things broken behind him. William, Emily said softly, if you lose everything. He looked at her. You won't, she said. Because you'll still have them. She nodded toward Noah's room. And that little girl who walked into a pawn shop and decided I was her problem. William looked down at his coffee, then back at Emily. You know, he said quietly. For years I thought success meant building something so big that nothing could ever touch you. And now? Emily asked. William thought about Annie's question again. What else is money for? Now I think success might just mean this, he said. Sitting in a hospital cafeteria, tired, scared, not knowing what's going to happen next, but knowing you didn't walk away when you had the chance. Emily didn't say anything, but her eyes filled with tears again. And somewhere down the hallway, a small boy slept with a repaired heart. And a little girl who believed in pancakes and helping strangers was drawing a picture of what she thought a family looked like. 3 days after the surgery, Noah was finally allowed to walk a few steps. It was a slow walk, from the hospital bed to the door and back again. With Emily on one side and a nurse on the other, Annie walked in front of him, walking backwards, talking the entire time like a tour guide who took her job very seriously. And this, Annie said, pointing to the hallway, is where the really bad hospital food comes from. So when you get better, we are never coming back here unless it's to bring cookies. Noah smiled, moving carefully, one small step at a time. I think that's a good rule, he said. William stood near the window, watching them. The doctor had said the surgery was successful, but recovery would take time. William understood business timelines, construction timelines, investment timelines, but this was the first time he had learned the timeline of healing. It was slow, careful, one step at a time. That afternoon, William received the official letter. Mark brought it to the hospital in a large envelope, his expression serious. They voted this morning, Mark said quietly as he handed the envelope over. William looked at it but didn't open it yet. That was fast, he said. They didn't want to give you time to convince anyone, Mark replied. Your mother led the meeting. Emily, who was sitting beside Noah's bed, looked up when she heard that. You don't have to open it now, she said quietly. William nodded, but after a moment, he opened the envelope anyway and read the letter inside. He read it once, then folded it neatly and put it back into the envelope. Well? Mark asked. William looked at him calmly. They removed me as CEO, he said. Effective immediately. Emily felt like the air had been knocked out of her chest. William, I'm so sorry, she said. This is because of me and Noah. William shook his head. No, he said. This is because the board and I have different ideas about what responsibility means. Noah looked at him from the bed. Does that mean you don't have a job anymore? He asked. William walked over and sat down beside him. It means I don't have that job anymore, he said. But I'll be okay. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he said something very serious. When I grow up, I'm going to get a job, he said. And if you don't have a job, you can work with me. Annie nodded immediately. Yes, we'll start a pancake restaurant, she said. And he can be the boss because he used to be a CEO. William laughed softly, and Emily had to wipe her eyes again. That sounds like a very good backup plan, William said. But later that evening, when Emily found William standing alone near the hospital vending machines, she could see the truth on his face. Not regret. Not exactly sadness, but the look of a man who understood that a door had closed behind him and would never open again. You really lost everything, didn't you? She said quietly. William shook his head slowly. No, he said. I lost a title. I lost an office. I lost a boardroom. He looked through the window into Noah's room, where Annie was showing Noah how to draw a very crooked pancake. But I think I found something more important. Emily crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. I never wanted this, she said. I never wanted you to lose your company because of us. William turned to look at her. Emily, listen to me carefully, he said. If helping my own family costs me a job, then that job was never worth keeping. She didn't know what to say to that. You know what my father used to tell me? William continued. He used to say, a Carter man protects the company first, the family second, and himself last. I believed that for most of my life. He paused. But he was wrong. Emily looked at him. What do you believe now? She asked. William thought for a moment before answering. I think a real man protects the people who can't protect themselves, he said. And if that costs him money, power, or reputation, then that's the price he pays. Emily felt tears run down her face again, but she didn't wipe them away this time. You're not the man your father raised, she said. William gave a small, tired smile. No, he said. I think I'm finally becoming the man my brother hoped I would be. Inside the hospital room, Noah was carefully clipping the silver bracelet around his wrist, while Annie watched like this was a very important ceremony. This means you're officially my cousin now, Annie said. I thought I was already your cousin, Noah said. You were, Annie replied. But now it's official, because you have the bracelet. William and Emily stood outside the door for a moment, watching them. Are you scared about what comes next? Emily asked quietly. William nodded. Yes, he said. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. Emily looked at him. Maybe that's okay, she said. For years, my whole life was just trying to survive until the next bill, the next problem, the next bad thing. I never had a plan either. I just had Noah. William looked at her, then back at the children in the room. Maybe that's enough, he said. Maybe people are more important than plans. Emily smiled a little. Daniel used to say something like that too, she said. William nodded. He was the smart brother, he said. And as they stood there, watching the two children laugh over a badly drawn pancake, William Carter realized something very simple and very important. For the first time in his life, he had lost control of everything. And for the first time in his life, he felt like everything that really mattered was finally within reach. When Noah was discharged from the hospital a week later, the world outside felt strangely normal. Cars still filled the streets. People still rushed with coffee cups in their hands. Stores opened, lights changed, and the city moved forward like it always did, as if nothing important had happened. But for the 4 people walking slowly out of St. Mary's Children's Hospital that morning, everything had changed. Noah walked carefully between Annie and William, one small step at a time. He was still weak, but he wasn't the same boy who had been wheeled into surgery. There was color in his face now. His eyes were brighter. Every few steps he looked up at the sky like he had forgotten how big it was. I didn't know outside smelled like this, Noah said. Emily smiled gently. That's because you've been inside for a long time, she said. Annie pointed across the street. First stop when you're stronger, she said, is pancakes. Real pancakes. Not hospital pancakes. Noah nodded seriously. That's a good plan. William watched them quietly. For the first time in years, he had nowhere he needed to be. No meeting. No boardroom. No assistant reminding him about a call with investors in another time zone. His phone had been quiet for 2 days now. At first, that silence had felt strange. Then it had felt uncomfortable. Now, it felt like freedom. They drove back to the house slowly, Emily sitting in the back with Noah, Annie talking the entire way about what books Noah needed to read and which pancakes were the best in the city. When they arrived, Noah stood in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house again. Are you sure we're allowed to live here? He asked quietly. William knelt slightly so he was at Noah's eye level. You're not living here because you're allowed, he said. You're living here because you belong. Noah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. That afternoon, while Noah rested, William sat at the large dining table with a stack of documents in front of him. Mark sat across from him, flipping through financial reports and legal files. If you sign these, Mark said, the Carter Foundation will be transferred entirely under your personal control instead of the company's. The board can't touch it. William nodded. And the housing fund? He asked. We can start with 20 properties, Mark said. Small houses, paid off, placed under the foundation. For families of injured workers, single parents, kids with medical needs, the kind of people who end up in pawn shops. William signed one document, then another. You know, Mark said, Most people who lose a company spend a year trying to get it back. William gave a small smile. I don't want it back, he said. Mark looked at him carefully. You really mean that, don't you? William leaned back in his chair. I spent my whole life building something that looked successful from the outside, he said. But I didn't even know my own nephew existed. That doesn't sound like success to me anymore. Mark nodded slowly. So what does success look like now? He asked. William thought for a moment. Then he looked through the window into the backyard where Annie was sitting on a blanket beside Noah, showing him how to draw a house with a big chimney and smoke that looked more like a cloud. It looks like that, William said quietly. That evening, Emily found William in the backyard, sitting on the steps, watching the kids. I talked to a social worker today, she said, sitting beside him, about going back to work once Noah is fully recovered. I don't want to depend on you forever. William nodded. I wouldn't respect you if you did, he said. She smiled a little. I don't need a big house, she said. I just want a small place where Noah feels safe. William was quiet for a moment. What if I told you I already have a small place? He said. One of the foundation houses, 3 bedrooms, good neighborhood, close to a school and a park. Emily looked at him. William, it's not charity, he said before she could finish. You'll pay rent. Not much. Just enough so you know it's yours, not mine. Emily felt tears fill her eyes again. It seemed like lately she was either crying or about to cry all the time. I don't know how to thank you, she said. William shook his head slightly. You already did, he said. How? She asked. By not giving up on Noah, William said. By sitting in that pawn shop instead of running away. By reminding me that my last name is supposed to mean something. Emily looked out at the yard where Annie and Noah were now arguing about whether the chimney smoke looked like a cloud or a dinosaur. You know, Emily said softly. For years I thought the Carter name ruined my life. William nodded slowly. And now? She watched Noah laugh at something Annie said. Now I think maybe it saved it, she said. William didn't respond right away. He just watched the 2 children running slowly across the grass, one still healing, the other making sure he didn't run too fast. Emily, he said after a while, I can't fix everything my family did, but I can make sure that from now on when someone with the Carter name sees a person crying in a pawn shop, they don't walk away. Emily nodded, and in the fading light of that afternoon, the big house that had once felt empty finally began to feel like something else. It began to feel like a home. The small house William chose for Emily and Noah was nothing like the Carter mansion, and that was exactly why he chose it. It sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, the kind of street where people still waved to each other in the morning, and children rode bicycles on the sidewalk. The house had a small front porch, white curtains in the windows, and a backyard just big enough for a garden and a swing. When Emily first saw it, she stood on the sidewalk and didn't move for a long time. It's too much, she said quietly. William shook his head. No, he said. Too much is a mansion with empty rooms and no one to eat dinner with. This is a house. Noah walked slowly up the path, still not fully strong, Annie walking beside him like a bodyguard. Is this really our house? Noah asked. Emily looked at William, unsure. You'll rent it, William said. $1 a month. Emily frowned. That's not rent. It is if we both agree it is, William replied. I'm not giving you a house, Emily. I'm giving you time. Time to work, time to save, time to breathe. Then one day, you can buy it from the foundation if you want, and it will really be yours. Emily turned away for a moment, pressing her hand to her eyes. I used to pray for a miracle, she said quietly. I just didn't think it would look like a small house with a porch. Noah pushed the door open and walked inside slowly. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. There's a room for you, Annie said, pulling him down the hallway, and we can put your books here and your drawings here and maybe a fish tank here. I've never had my own room before, Noah said. Annie stopped walking and looked at him. Then we have a lot of decorating to do, she said seriously. William and Emily stood in the doorway watching the 2 children walk through the house like explorers discovering a new world. You didn't just save his life, Emily said quietly. You changed it. William shook his head. No, he said. Annie did that. She's the one who asked why you were crying. I was the one who wanted to walk away. Emily looked at him. But you didn't, she said. William didn't respond. He just watched Annie showing Noah how to open and close the kitchen cabinets like this was the most exciting thing in the world. A few weeks later, Noah was strong enough to start school again. On his first day, he was nervous. He stood in front of the school building holding his backpack, looking like he might turn around and run back to the car. "What if the kids don't like me?" he asked. Annie crossed her arms. "Then they're very silly," she said. "And I will talk to them." "You can't just talk to everyone who's mean to me," Noah said. "Yes, I can," Annie replied. "It's called a conversation." William knelt in front of Noah. "Listen," he said. "You don't have to be the strongest kid or the smartest kid on the first day. You just have to be brave enough to walk through that door." Noah nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "And Noah?" William added. "Yes? If anyone asks who your family is, you tell them you have a mom, a cousin who talks too much, and an uncle who owes you pancakes." Noah smiled. "Okay." Months passed. Emily found a steady job working in the administrative office of a community clinic. Noah grew stronger. Annie continued to believe that every problem in the world could be solved with pancakes, drawings, and very direct conversations. William spent his days building the Carter Foundation instead of the Carter Corporation. They bought more small houses. They set up medical funds. They created scholarships for children of construction workers and single parents. One afternoon, almost a year after the day in the pawn shop, William received a letter. It was not from the board, not from his mother, not from a lawyer. It was from Noah. The letter was written in careful, uneven handwriting. "Dear Uncle William, my teacher said we have to write about a hero. Some kids wrote about superheroes and some kids wrote about soldiers. I wrote about you, but I didn't write that you are rich. I wrote that you saw my mom crying and you didn't walk away. My teacher said a hero is someone who helps people even when it costs them something. I think that is true. Thank you for fixing my heart. I will eat pancakes with you forever. Love, Noah." William sat at his desk for a long time after reading that letter. On the wall behind him was a new sign that read, "Carter Foundation, no one fights alone." That evening, he went to Emily's house for dinner. It had become a tradition: Sunday dinners, pancakes on Saturday mornings, birthdays, school meetings, normal things that had nothing to do with boardrooms or stock prices. After dinner, they all sat on the small front porch. Noah was talking about school. Annie was explaining a very complicated plan to start a pancake restaurant one day. Emily was laughing in a way William had never heard in the pawn shop. "Dad," Annie said suddenly, "do you remember the day we met Emily?" William nodded. "Of course I do. That was the most important day," Annie said. "Why?" he asked. "Because that was the day we became a real family," she said. William looked at Emily, then at Noah, then at Annie. For most of his life, he had believed that family was something you were born into. Now he knew better. Family was the people you didn't walk away from. And sometimes, it began with a little girl looking at a crying stranger in a pawn shop and asking a question that changed everything. "Why is she crying, Dad?" This story carries a simple but powerful lesson. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives begin with a small decision, the decision not to walk away. William had money, power, and success. But none of those things made him a hero. What changed his life was not a business deal, but a moment in a pawn shop, when a little girl asked why a stranger was crying. The story reminds us that money is not meant to build walls between people. It is meant to open doors for those who have none left. It also teaches that family is not only the people we are born with, but the people we choose to stand beside when life becomes difficult. In the end, success is not measured by how much we own, but by how many people we refuse to leave behind when they are at their lowest. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.